Welcome to Foundations and Front Doors, where we want to be the foundation to your front door. I'm Carrie Sistare, owner of Sistare Southern Properties team at Keller Innovate South. I have Jenny King with me, who is a loan officer at Legendary Mortgage. And today we're going to be talking about, should you keep renting or should you look at purchasing a home along the Grand Strand? Okay, first we're going to start with the market overview. We're going to talk about local stats and the cost of rent versus owning. So Jenny, can you give us a quick idea of what an estimated rent monthly payment looks like compared to what an estimated mortgage payment in Myrtle Beach would be?
Yeah, so first, thank you for having me. That's a big, broad question, I'll be honest, because, rent is all over the map here in our local communities. I mean, we see, depending on whether you're in an apartment, a single family home, what kind of community you're in, it can range. But on average, if we're looking at standard like 2-bedroom to 3-bedroom apartments versus homes, we're somewhere between, I would say, $1,700 to around $2,500 a month in rent.
Okay.
Mortgage payments on average depend on obviously the purchase price of the home, how much you're putting down. But I would say fairly recently, based on current average home prices that are somewhere in the mid-threes, would you agree?
Yes.
We're seeing with a standard normal down payment and average interest rate somewhere around $2,000 to $2,500 a month, just depending on your interest cost, or not interest cost, interest rate, your insurance cost, and then what your taxes are going to look like for that property as well, and whether it requires flood insurance if you're in a high-risk flood zone. So there's a lot of factors involved.
And then what would you say about rising rent payments versus what a stable fixed monthly payment would look like if you had a mortgage?
Well, look, if you are someone who is really ready to buy and buying is really the right decision for you, rising rent is always going to be a loss because you're simply investing in somebody else's mortgage or somebody else's dreams. And even if a mortgage payment to start is a touch higher than what you had thought it might be, but it is doable, it is affordable, you can make it work, that's always going to be the better play because now you're investing in yourself. And it's really incumbent upon us as real estate agent and lender to make sure that we're having active conversations with our clients about what their long-term goals are. Because once you get into a home with your initial mortgage, that isn't necessarily going to be your mortgage forever. And there's a lot of strategies to pay it off early. There's a lot of really cool things that we can do to make your money work for you. So is that helpful?
Yes, that's very helpful. And what would you tell a first home buyer if you had anything to tell them? Anyone that's viewing that wants to buy a house for the first time, what advice would you give them?
Great question. I would say prepare as early as you can. Because here's what happens a lot with first-time home buyers. There's a lot of different people who are in the conversation, parents, grandparents, friends, you've got professionals. There's a ton of people who are talking in your ear, and all of them mean so well. But their experience isn't necessarily your experience. And so what we see is they wait a really long time until they're emotionally ready. And then we find that maybe there's some small reason why they can't technically qualify or it's not the right time to purchase. And then we have to break their heart because now we have to do all of this work. And so the moment you get it in your head that someday you want to be a homeowner, I don't care how early that is, let's start having the conversation and putting a plan in action so we can at least make sure that every day, every month, every year that you're thinking about it, that you're moving towards that goal.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And let's just talk about the big elephant in every room, which is interest rates.
Yeah.
What would you tell a viewer right now that is worried about, is it the right time to buy, and they're basing their information on what they're hearing about the interest rates?
I love this question so much, and here's what I find. 99% of the time when people are afraid of interest rates, it's because everyone they're speaking to is answering the wrong question. The right question you should be asking about interest rates is, what can I afford from a monthly payment perspective? And depending on my financial goals, am I thinking or being concerned with the total cost of ownership of that home? Because the monthly payment is one piece, but really what is going to cost you to own that home over the life that you're paying a mortgage is a big part of the conversation too. Because if you're a first-time home buyer, for example, most first-time home buyers are somewhere in their late 20s to mid-30s. You're not thinking about your later years and your income at the time that you're in your highest earning potential yet, but the kind of mortgage you take on can really impact what your retirement life looks like. And so those are all things that we have to consider. So I'd say before you get scared of an interest rate and you say, oh, I'm not buying it, it's just too high, get with a loan officer like me who can have a conversation with you and really flesh out for you and map out what an interest rate really means to you. And we also have incredible strategies to get lower interest rates on those loans when you apply if you're ready to buy. So there's lots of things that you should be considering, but a great conversation with a skilled and caring loan officer makes a big difference.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, next we're going to talk about the pros and cons of renting versus buying. So we're going to break down the pros and the cons of each. First, we're going to talk about why it might be better to rent versus owning. And I'm going to share a quick story. So when my husband and I moved here 15 years ago, he had to be here in 4 days. So we vacationed to Myrtle Beach all the time. But we didn't know what was around Myrtle Beach. We have the biggest county in South Carolina. So 4 days, we didn't want to rent, but we needed to, just to see exactly where we wanted to buy a house at. Because location is super important, and buying a house is the biggest investment of your life. So we didn't want to be rushed in. So renting was the best option at first for us. What do you think about renting being a benefit over buying?
You know, that's always a big discussion, and it's such an individual conversation. And I would say by and large, the number one reason why somebody should continue to rent instead of buy is because they're not financially prepared for ownership. Owning a home is not a small expense. And even if you're buying new construction, we get young buyers, actually a lot of buyers, all age ranges, who say, I want to bring as little to the table as possible. And often that translates to, I don't have anything saved. And while we as loan officers have some really cool creative tools, down payment assistance programs, seller assistance that can help you get to the table with no money, just because you can afford the monthly payment doesn't mean that moving into a home with no cushion is a good idea. And so sometimes you don't have to save 20%. That's a myth. We can talk about that in another video. But it is nice to have something, because even if it's new construction, your home is going to have maintenance costs. There are things that you're going to have to pay right away, and you need to make sure that you're prepared for that. And also, we see a lot right now, young people, right? They're moving back home with their families rather than renting. And then they go out into the world and try to buy a home. And honestly, sometimes we need to have you go out into the market and rent so that you can experience what your budget really looks like with that money gone every month. If you've never paid rent before, moving into a mortgage can be a huge mistake. And the last thing you want is buyer's remorse. And now you can't move out of the home because you don't have enough equity to be able to clear when you try to sell. So there's a lot of reasons why renting can make sense. Buying from a long-term perspective is obviously the ultimate goal, but from that perspective, there's a lot of benefits for renting.
Correct. I agree. And if we're going to talk about the long-term buying goal and what the benefit of that is, other than building equity, what would you say to a home buyer in this viewing?
Yeah, well, statistically, outside of stocks and some of your other bigger investments, for the average American, or even those who are a bit above average in terms of earnings, real estate has always been the best vehicle for building wealth. So outside of the equity that you build from a perspective of being able to make money on the home, it also gives you the ability to leverage that money to do other things. So let's say you buy a great home, you at some point decide you want to rent that home, and then you want to go buy another home. You now have available equity in that home that you can pull out to purchase another home, purchase an investment property, invest in stocks. There's a whole host of things that property now can do for you, because it's not just a home, it is a financial vehicle, which in many instances, if you have the right realtor and lender who help you make sure you make a great purchase up front, that home's going to perform for you very well. And I think for me, that's the biggest win in homeownership.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, we're going to go over some quick common myths about buying. These are some myths, I think, that are the top ones, in our opinion, that you hear about buying. So the first one, obviously, is, do I have to have 20% down to purchase a home?
No, you do not. And in many instances, even if you save 20%, it might not make sense to put 20% down. Because again, in this economy, the very best thing that you can do for yourself is figure out how to spend your dollars the most effective way to earn you the most money from those dollars. And really, a lot of old school thought is that you have to have 20% down so that you don't have to pay something called mortgage insurance. And mortgage insurance is a quick policy that the lender takes out so that if you default or can't pay the loan, they can cover their losses. But realistically, depending on how you look as a buyer, mortgage insurance can be very inexpensive. And it's not going to serve you necessarily to save $20 a month and put an extra $10, $15, $20, $30,000 down when that money could be out working for you dually in some other vehicle. So no, you don't have to. And there's a lot of programs out there. You can buy with a down payment as low as 3% with a conventional loan if you qualify, 3.5% with FHA. USDA has a 0 option, and so does VA with 0 down potentially. So there's a lot of great options out there.
Another thing I hear is, oh my gosh, my credit is not perfect. So how am I going to purchase a home and get a mortgage and financing options?
This is actually one of my favorite because credit is really 1,000 times easier than you think it is, truly. It's about time, intention, and attention. And realistically, there are programs that go down to 580 where you can get an approval. Now, my job as a loan officer is if you have a 580 and we have a path to get you a higher score so we can get you some better interest rate pricing, then we will do that. But for some people, buying at that 580 makes sense because we have a plan strategically to get them in a better position over time. And we don't want you to miss out on the investment if it's the right time for you. So yeah, you don't have to have perfect credit, and your loan officer can walk you through some things to do to help better your credit and move forward with your investment in a great way.
And a lot of people say buying is more expensive than renting. So how do you feel about that?
So that can be a myth, but it can also not be a myth. In some cases, it is more expensive to buy than it is to rent. But you have to remember, at the end of the day, those dollars are going towards something that you're building for yourself. So in some instances, that can make sense. But in a lot of, cases that we see, it's not more expensive. In fact, it's far less than you probably anticipated it would be, and then you're building something for yourself.
And a lot of people say, if I buy something, I'm going to have more responsibility taking care of that versus renting something someone else owns.
And I think that's 100% true, right? It's your home. You should take pride in it. There is going to be a lot more responsibility. But like anything in life, you can't have something great come out of nothing, right? You've got to put in the effort. But let's be honest, if you're a great tenant, you're going to take a lot of responsibility in your rental as well. So I don't see it as a negative to have more responsibility. It's one of those things, you're investing in you, and every moment you take care of your property, that's just more money in your pocket as the value grows.
Okay, do you have a success story or a real example where a renter went from renting to buying and it made a huge difference?
Yeah, there's so many, but honestly, I can think of one. I had a lady very recently, beautiful woman. She's been renting for her entire life, well into middle age. There's a lot of expectations sometimes that you should purchase a home by a certain point. It's just not true. Everybody's life story is not the same. But she worked really hard to save a ton of money, all while going through a major cancer diagnosis. Yeah, and going through that and finding her way to remission and all of those things. So as you can imagine, life is not always so easy when you're trying to do the things and deal with what life hands you. And so she came to us, we got her pre-qualified. She was paying about $1,300 a month in rent, and we were able to, alongside her amazing realtor, find her a beautiful townhome, mortgage payment, identical, including HOA. And what was really cool is after we initially qualified her, she came to the table with all the cash that she needed to close, but her realtor was able to negotiate her a seller credit. to keep that money in her pocket. And then we discovered that there was a down payment assistance program that would cover the full down payment for her. So when she closed, she not only got a new home, a fresh start, a mortgage payment that matched her rent, but she also got like $2,000 back at the closing table, which is not normal. Like, that's not a usual thing. So I don't say that to set the expectation that you should expect money back, but I say that to say that sometimes when it feels like the odds are not in your favor, there are incredible things that will happen if you just have the right team who's really diligent and really cares about your outcome.
I agree.
That was a win.
Yeah,
Huge win.
Huge win. Next step for our viewers.
Okay.
If someone is watching who is renting and unsure where to start, what should they do first?
So the very first thing you should do is, if you've already connected with a realtor, because maybe you've been looking online and you've already found properties that pique your interest, talk with a realtor partner about who they trust from a lender perspective, because that is your very first step. Your very first step is seeing what you qualify for, what programs are out there for you, what could your purchase budget be. If you're not able to be qualified right away, what is it going to take to get you there? Because a great loan officer, if they can't give you a loan right away, they should absolutely give you a playbook as to how you get there, an estimate on that timeline, and then what actions you have to take to get ready. So that's your very first step, and that's going to clarify a lot of things for you that will let you know then what your next step is. Either you're ready to go look for homes, or hey, there's some other things you have to do to get ready. And then we hold your hand, grab arms, and we walk the walk together until we get you there and beyond.
So if you want to look for a home and you connect with a realtor, we don't know what to show you at first. Without the pre-qualification, we don't want to show you a home that you fall in love with and it's not supported by what you feel comfortable buying. So you would connect with somebody like Jenny and they would start that pre-qualification process for you. So can you just explain what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I would do is, when you are connected with a lender, you want to interview that lender before you give them all your information. Have a great conversation. Make sure they vibe with you. Make sure they're really asking great questions about your goals and what's important to you. But once you do that, you're going to want to ask them if they do a true pre-approval process or if they do a pre-qualification process. And here's the difference. Online companies, you'll see a lot of their links in popular advertising. They'll take basic information in an application and they'll spit out a letter to say, hey, you're pre-qualified. And often that's a recipe for having your heart broken, because if anything's discovered in loan process, it could kill the ability to purchase a home for you. And we don't want that. So the true approval process means that we're going to have you complete the application. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and that can be done via a link that we send you, or we'll take the application with you over the phone or in person. It's really your preference. And then we're going to have a phone conversation, what we call a discovery call. And that discovery call is going to help me learn about what's important to you, what your financial goals are, what your employment looks like, how much money you have saved. And it's going to really help us create a beautiful buyer story for you, so that when we present who you are as a buyer to the bank, they can really understand that you're someone they want to lend money to purchase a home.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in purchasing a home and wanting to just see where you are, like if you're renting and you want to see what you're qualified for,
Absolutely.
I urge you to connect with one of us. We are no pressure. I would say we're not going to pressure you into anything. We are just here to help you feel more confident about
Absolutely.
making a home purchase. So our information will be below. You can reach out to either one of us. And I just say happy house hunting and thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.